the 22nd. I'm sorry, the 2nd October 2022. We'll get there. Hope everybody's doing good on this Sunday night, the first show of October. Nuclear still a scumbag. Get after it here. We got lots to cover. We're going to do a show on a Friday, but I caught the flu somewhere. I had to take a break on Friday. When I woke up, I could barely breathe, and I was phlegmed up, everything else. And so we didn't do a show on Friday. I wasn't going to do one tonight, but I'm feeling okay enough to do a show. It's a rough weekend, not feeling good at all. That's the flu will do that to you. So 95% of the worms researchers looked at in Japan that were raised in soil from Tokyo, 220 kilometers away from multiple nuclear meltdowns, 95% died, and the survivors grew 10 times the average size. In the first year in Japan after Fukushima, there was an extra 865,000 cancers. 865,000 cancers extra. The reports worldwide in the mainstream media is nobody cut their finger at Fukushima. This is what the nuclear industry is basically like. When you look down, you only see shitheads because the industry hates each other. They don't actually have anybody that the world can relate to. And when the bottom level in the nuclear industry look up, they only see a-holes. First, the shoe bomber showed up and you lost your shoes at the airports, train stations, sometimes malls. Then the underwear bomber, and then everybody lost their freedom. So all the terrorists got to do is sneeze and everybody loses their nose. I used to show these sometimes years and years ago. I tried to pull them back out. Equal rights for corporations, because corporations are people. They have certain human rights that they're not entitled to from an illegal amendment to the American Constitution that spilled over into the Bill of Rights and Magna Cartas and countries that based their charters upon those doctrines. And corporations got human rights, which means you can't hold them accountable because, like, Mark Zuckerberg can't go to jail at Facebook. Facebook can get a fine. You can't put the investors in jail, see? So there's actually no incentive not to be evil. My fellow Americans, let me make this perfectly clear. I represent the little people. And I'm not sure when that stopped or if it actually ever existed. But there's your Supreme Court justices. And they're told what to do by apples. So what you need to control a media system and conceal the actual uniformity is what you're looking at right there. And we've covered them for years and years. And anybody that has a different opinion is exterminated.
All he said was it wasn't like a banana or a potato chip or walking in the sunshine. This is kind of severe punishment, isn't it?
Al-Qaeda is planning a casino to raise terrorist funds, which actually makes sense when you think about it. And because we formatted everything last week, we're going to have some issues that I forgot about. That's okay. We'll get after it later. The Bill of Rights The Constitution has imprisoned the entire planet. Stop being teddy bears and rise up is all I can tell you, because you are running out of time. And it's your responsibility. You have the responsibility, not your piece of paper, but you as a person. You're the responsibility. They can't get away with evil without you being complicit. This story bugged the daylights out of me. Wind and solar top 10% of global power generation for the first time. Now you read the story, they say it's 39%, which worldwide, right? Which is basically 40%. So hydro, it includes hydro and nuclear. Now nuclear is not renewable. So to put that in the equation, that's on purpose, right? Because people are drawn to the headline, oh, renewables on the go. And then they read over and over and over, everybody go, nuclear somehow is good, right? Because they captured your regulatories and your medias over time. Nuclear and others, zero carbon power, accounted for 85% of all new capacity in 2021. Which is 364 gigawatts came online, but renewables or nuclear was less than 1%. But you see how they framed it right there to make it look like nuclear was leading the charge? So if you go back and look at Snyder, who gives a synopsis on the energy industry, nuclear power has become irrelevant. It was a net nuclear capacity increase of 0.4 gigawatts. That's equal to half a nuclear power plant. And renewables added an estimated 248 gigawatts. 248. 2021 was a record year, so was 2020. The report estimated by 2026 the world will have 4,800 gigawatts new renewable from 2020 to 2026, a 6-year period, will be 4,800 gigawatts. None of that is nuclear, which is over 60% increase from 2020 levels and equal to amount of power that is currently being generated from all fossil fuels and nuclear sources combined worldwide. So all the energy on the planet can be replaced in a 6-year period. And of course, nuclear or renewables get more efficient, more effective each 6 months or something. And so what I'm saying is by 2026, when you look at the next 6 years after 2026, now because you're talking about an industry that's been throttled, you're talking about prices for commodities that have skyrocketed in the last 2 years, yet renewables still beat the brakes off the gas, oil, coal, and disgusting nuclear industry. Construction has started on 2 nuclear reactors in the state in 1972. But the time of what spurred there, in 1996 they completed the first one. 22 years later, 24 years later, and then in 2016, that's the last 2 reactors they brought online, was 44 years. That's pretty dismal, right? For like skill-wise, it shows you the industry. So the global nuclear industry lost the new built market. 5 reactors started up in 2020, and 6 were closed down. There was a net capacity increase of 0.4 gigawatts in nuclear, which is irrelevant, and renewables added an estimated 248 gigawatts, which is equal basically to 300 nuclear power plants coming online. So that was equal last year, or 2020 was equal to 300 nuclear power plants where the renewables came online, and last year was 333. But remember, in those 2 years, everything was shut down from the pandemic. Right? So they didn't have, and commodities were driven through they done it on purpose to scuttle the renewable industry. It's hard to appreciate how much control the nuclear industry has over your governments, your universities, your medias, your regulatory agencies, and your planet. It's really, for the average person, it's impossible to actually comprehend, unless you find someone like me who's able to articulate it and show them the documentation. You know, I should do a radio show. I should take some more Buckley's. Buckley's is not a sponsor, by the way. That's a joke. Scenes of destruction following Hurricane Ian's landfall. Came ashore with sustained winds of 155 miles per hour. 155 miles per hour. By the way, I'm Dana Durnford, the nuclearproctologist.org. This is the Nuclear Scumbag Show, and you can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. And so these supercell storms you don't have building codes in states for 155 miles per hour sustained winds, which means it's gusting over 200 miles per hour sustained for maybe a minute at a time. And if you talk to the victims of the last 10 years of these supercell hurricanes caused by Fukushima's releases, heating up the ocean and the planet, because they dry out all the forest, and the forest doesn't work no more. But anyway, my heart goes out to these people. I know Elaine is down in Florida somewhere, and I'm worried sick. And other people, of course, obviously, but it's worse when you know somebody, right? That might be in this kill zone. So does it make any sense to rebuild Florida? I can't see how that makes sense, to build these places that have shown that it's pointless. If I lived there, there'd be zero possibility of rebuilding. This is not a 1 in a 1,000-year storm or a 1 in a 100-year storm. This is a yearly storm now. And you don't have building codes for these types of catastrophic winds. You know, it's really something. Howling winds. So I was really sick all weekend. 150 miles per hour. It was actually, it's interesting because you don't put the gust in there. If you look at your local forecast and it's going to blow 20 kilometers an hour, then the gust will usually be over double that. It'll be 40, 45 kilometers an hour or whatever, right? And so when you get 150 miles per hour sustained, Gust will be up to at least 225 miles per hour. The building codes anywhere in North America for that kind of wind, because it's not normal. It's not supposed to come ashore anywhere. It's not, right? But in the last 11 years, this is the same thing with typhoons and cyclones. This is the new normal. But it's not normal. We don't have infrastructure that can hang with this kind of a wind. It's instantly, everything is then turned into projectiles. If you hang your arm out a window of a car at 150 miles an hour, you'll break your arm. And Ontario planning to keep Pickering nuclear power station open till 2026. This is a new theme we've seen, and particularly coming to fruition in the last couple of weeks. Pickering is supposed to close permanently. It's had major disasters there. The non-regulatory agencies in Canada had raised the limit of releases for, say, just tritium. You can't just release tritium, by the way. It has to be all kinds of other stuff. But they had raised the limits, we covered this a few weeks back, to 35 million, I'm not sure if it was 35 million billion or 35 million trillion. I think it was 35 million trillion as a acceptable release. But that's a large accident. That's not a large accident. That's an event. That's a catastrophic event, that much of a release. And again, the Canadian nuclear industry is actually the worst industry for nuclear on the planet. They're absolutely out of control. They removed all restrictions on food from Fukushima after 93 days. So that's why everybody in Canada is sick. Amidst the looming energy crisis and obesity after a nuclear accident, is a sign of radiation brain damage. And Japan had doubled within the first year or so, and Canada has exploded. Amidst the looming energy crisis, which is caused by an embargo from NATO and United Nations, this seditious corporation has 195 militaries. That's what Eisenhower calls the military-industrial complex. So it wasn't an energy crisis. This was an embargo. This was sanctions. And this caused the inflation. And when they announced these embargoes and sanctions in February, I put out a video right away the same day saying, holy crap, folks, this is inflation in overdrive. It's going to hit you within 48 hours. The whole planet just got hoodwinked by this disgusting organization known as United Nations. And NATO is not supposed to exist. They were created because of the Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union scum dissolved their country and closed everybody's pensions too, they should have dissolved NATO. NATO has no right to exist. And now look at it. Now it's a murderous, hateful, despicable, unaccountable industry that nobody can control. EDF plans, industry being genocide. France plans to extend the lifespan of 2 UK nuclear power projects. Again, this is a lot of posturing. They don't have the manpower. Right? They don't have the supply chain. There's an absurd amount of resistance, and it's the wrong thing to do. Is to extend the nuclear industry, particularly to build new nuclear industries. Why would you do something like that? I just showed you earlier how renewables curb stomp all other industries, and that's without storage. They've been suppressing energy storage. And there's a lot of storage options for renewables, but it's been suppressed on a whole different scale that we've been able to show consistently for many, many years. Energy bosses consider extending the life of Teesside nuclear power plant. These are key words, consider. This was part of an agenda. This is why Russia had said that if NATO kept invading Ukraine and co-opting Ukraine, they were going to be left with no choice but to capture Ukraine, right? And Ukraine, of course, was a civil war in 2014. The Americans overthrew the current government and installed the little dictator that they got now, which would rather destroy every infrastructure, every building in the country than surrender. Has already caused over half the country population to flee permanently. And of course, Ukraine couldn't fight back if NATO didn't constantly, which is 30 militaries, didn't constantly supply illegal and ammunitions. The Union chief says the move to keep the power station going would be the least worst option. Well, because they only quote one person. And then the union chiefs, which need these places to keep their employees pumping money into the union. There's incredible disease factories, these sites. They moved union officials say would be good for jobs. Of course, that's what they're going to say. What else would they say? If you say anything else, the people in the union will vote them out, right? Nuclear obesity. I got a couple of videos we'll play at the end of from the weekend. I'm pretty sure I figured out what happened to the engine. Was the fuel pump gave up because the filter is empty. Because I have a Raycor filter in the hole with the fuel tanks, right? Because the tanks hold 35 gallons. There's 3 12.5 gallon tanks below the deck. They're all plumbed in each individual, so I can just turn a valve, right, and feed the engine. And I'll show you the video anyway at the end of it. Now, when I turned the key on and went back by the engine, I couldn't hear the fuel pump pumping. Because you would normally hear it right away. But I got to get someone to go and turn the key while I'm back there just to double check tomorrow. But the filter, the see-through filter on the back was empty. So I took the cover off. I seen the empty filter. I was like, oh, man. What's the odds of having 2 breakdowns like that at the same time? Because we fixed the other one where all the single lights and warning lights all went off. No alarms anymore. We put the idler control valve on. But it wasn't getting fuel to keep running, to even start up, rather. EDF has announced, whereas just a couple of weeks ago it would run perfect. It just wouldn't run past 30%, right? EDF has announced that it's not a big deal. We'll figure it out. I'll talk about it at the end, hopefully. And so they got 2 reactors that, of course, France got half its fleet is offline too, see? It's like 25, 26 reactors are offline in France from poor design. Polls suggest a quiet majority support Sizewell C. A poll suggests that they're ashamed of themselves, obviously. Majority And Sizewell C is a disease factory in the United Kingdom where they had, it's an old reactor site surrounded by farms. I just hope I don't wig out here and choke out. Trying to avoid drinking water because I got Buckley's, dear. And the Buckley I got tastes like Vic Vapors rub. It's not really, you're not going to take a spoonful because it's sweet. A quiet majority, which is the employees basically and the people in the community that wants a job. The independent survey was commissioned by no less than the people that are going to build it, EDF. How is that an independent survey? It was commissioned by the people that want to build it. It's absurd, right? This is the norm, though, for the nuclear industry, where they artificially inflate every facet of the stories. Surveys carried out in 2020, all the way back to 2020. 58% were in favor of the station, 27% were opposed. This is 2020 survey during a pandemic. Because November 2020, everybody was locked in their houses. There was anybody call them up and ask them what they thought about the nuclear, they probably would have screamed at them, told them to get sick and die or something. EDF has been open and transparent. EDF, this is France's government corporation. And so, United Kingdom now wants to build their nuclear waste repository under the Atlantic Ocean, 5 to 10 kilometers out to sea. So we got a poll tonight, and let's talk about that for a second. Because General Electric, Toshiba, and Hitachi built the reactors at Fukushima. So doesn't it make more sense to replace TEPCO with the company who built Fukushima nuclear power plants? TEPCO's not a decommission authority. Looks like we got spammed. Or unless we got TEPCO employees watching the video. That's the nuclear industry for you. It does stuff like that, right? And again, I apologize for not doing the show on Friday night, but when I woke up, I was coughing and phlegming, and it was horrible. I had a headache. And I said, I better cancel the show right then and go clean out the brain. And, man, I've been sick for a couple of days, hardcore. Let's keep her going here. Japan's Kyushu region was hit by a 5.6 magnitude earthquake. Now they got nuclear plants all over the country, so even if they're not running, they're full of fuel, reactor cores, and the fuel pools are still full of reactor cores. And so an earthquake, even by a shut down reactor, could cause uncontrolled chain reaction and detonations equal or worse than what we've seen in Japan and Moyak. 5.7 or any other places that have, because Santa Susana was 460 times more radioactive fallout than 3 Mile Island. In other words, it's equal to 460 3 Mile Islands worth of radiation melting down. Santa Susana down by Los Angeles. And they hid that for 55 years. It happened in 59. It went from an M.6, a 5.6. Now, Japan scale is 1 to 7, not 1 to 10. So then it was, next headline was 5.7. Next one was 5.8. But they call it a lower 5 on the Japanese seismic intensity scale is 7. And so you divide 7 into 10 and you got 1.428. So then you're going to multiply lower 5s, which is 5.4, right? 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4. And 5.5 is considered a lower 5. And an upper 5 is 5.6, 5.7, 5.8. So a 5.4 is actually equal to a 7.7 on the international scale. And so that's something you got to be concerned about, because Japan has a lot of reactors and they're not very far away, especially when it comes to earthquake. And this thing was shallow, about 25 miles deep. So that's really, really shallow, and which means it's severe shaking. It's something to worry about, because the radioactive plumes come right to North America within a couple of days. So I looked up the maps for you, and you can see the X. That's where the earthquake was. And that's where the power plants are too. Earthquake, power plants. Power plants. So it's not unusual for half the country to be violently shaking when you get, because when you're talking about, because their scale is 1 to 7, so when you go from like a 3 to a 4 to a 5 to a 6, these each are 100 to 1,000 times more intensity, because it's a significance difference in the intensities. Aging nuclear station in Ontario has been given a new lease on life. It's super scary for the average Canadians. They got the mayor of Toronto there. It's a height of stupidity. Canada is housing one of the biggest fossil fuel reserves on the planet. On our coast, we've been capping fuel for about 40 years. They only have one rig out there. And to overcome this artificially manufactured crisis, fatal methods are being adopted and lives of the Canadians are put at risk. As a result, what we see are seeing happening in Ontario is that millions of residents can soon find themselves tossed into deadly radiation chambers. Which is what it is. When you have a massive radioactive fallout, you can't go anywhere in your home or anywhere else in your city and escape it. And the longer you are there, the shorter your lifespan is, and the more guaranteed of illnesses and diseases will manifest. Because the industry wants you to think of only cancer, and we see this in just thousands and thousands and thousands of studies we've covered, from the crazy academic community. The betrayal in the academic community is just stunning. The facility must be shut down, according to the studies 2006, 2009, by 2025. They're going to keep it open. It was supposed to close down in 2024. And now they just announced that they're going to give it an extension by 1 year or something, 2 years. In 1983, the reactor 2 had a loss of coolant accident. So they raised the limit of, now they only acknowledged tritium back then, but because Lake Ontario and their drinking water supplies, Lake Superior and that, these are the biggest aquifers on the planet. The biggest freshwater reserves on the planet. And the Americans got plants all over the shorelines of these massive freshwater inland oceans, freshwater oceans. Basically, they're so big. So in 1983, They raised the limit for tritium in drinking water to 44,000. California's limit is 15, not 1,000, but 15 counts per minute. Whereas Canada raised to 44,000, and about 10, 15 years later, they lowered it down to 22,000. He poisoned everybody, right? The industry is just disgusting. No matter how we look at the industry, if the Pickering nuclear plant has an event, 650,000 people could lose their homes and would be required to evacuate permanently. So it's not very often we get people acknowledging how Lancashire nuclear storage dump. I just hate media. They're so revolting, eh? They do anything to cut your throat on this planet. Could create 4,000 new jobs. Could create. Listen, they'll promise you'll live for 1,000 years if that's what it takes to get you to let them build it. And BBC, which is the government mouthpiece for UK, nuclear waste disposal site would create thousands of jobs. And that's fine. It's absurd because it shows you how derelict the industry is, that because they don't have a disposal site. After 80 years, they still don't have it. They never even tried. They don't want it. And this one won't come to fruition, even if they start right now, for about another 40 years. But why do they need to put it under the ocean? I think I got a crap load of pictures I took from their video. We'll get to that. More than 4,000 jobs in the first 25 years of operation. Again, because they're trying to sell it in the community. When this is supposed to, it's going to take them 175 years is what they're talking about to fill it up. 175 years. So it would create work for about 175 years. First off, all of it should be somewhere where it can't hemorrhage into the environment. And what I mean by that is the fuel is still splitting the atoms. And we're talking about an absurd amount. And so they've had, in the last number of days or months, a lot of conversations about this. Look at that. Look at all the similar stories that they published trying to sell this story, right? So they say all the nuclear waste they got would fill up a swimming pool or something. Does that look like a swimming pool to you? This is 10 miles out at sea we're talking about too. And they conveniently left that edited depictions, by the way, that is under the ocean. A multi-billion pound facility, the big hole in the ground. Aims to dispose of around 10% of the UK's nuclear waste. 10%. 10%. And all these caverns. 1,000 meters underground, 3,000 feet underground, kilometer underground, and 5 to 10 kilometers out to sea. Now, they don't show you any picture of the ocean. I'll show you what I mean. A mix of engineers, scumbag engineers, and barriers under the ocean. If it gets into a chain reaction, starts consuming everything, it'll just consume all the way up. And this is what we know about this, will happen at some point. No matter where you do it on the planet, it's going to just go into a chain reaction somewhere. Once it leaves the containment that you're storing it in, it's going to go into a chain reaction. cost around 20 to 53 billion euros, or British pounds probably. Well, they're showing 53 billion. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. 53 billion to store the nuclear. So they turn nuclear, every facet, everything they do with nuclear has to be in the billions. There's nothing normal about this industry outside of it's normal for them to rob the country that has hosted this disease factory. Radioactive waste management is looking at a potentially building a nuclear waste storage site in many places, in Colombia and other places. You can see the ocean out there, and that's the last you'll see of course. So they got trains will bring the cast. Let me see if I can get this right. We'll bring the cast. It'll all be done automatically by remote control. People are there, but it's mostly remote control. It'll lay it there. Another train will come in, pick it up, and it'll bring it way down under the ocean, drive it way, way out where it gets transferred. And then now it's repurposed, repositioned. See the people in the lead-lined control room? They're going to lower it down to another, they're going to lower it down to where that one comes in, picks it up, and brings it back up. Comes up and repositions it, drives it out to one of their holes in the ground, drops it down there, and then puts a plug on it, and then drives away. And then they block in that section. So look at all the massive amount of... the whole story is just absurd, isn't it? And they're still producing it. And then at the top of it, it's all cows. Now, everything is vented on the way there. Every nuclear power plant and every nuclear dump, well, not everyone, but 99% of them, are surrounded by farms. You say every state would consider small nuclear reactors, a letter. They can be built quickly, the size of a football stadium. I thought they fit on the back of a pickup truck. It cost about $1 billion and can be located near to where the energy is needed. And they don't exist. They can't quantify those assertions. There's zero possibility it's going to be $1 billion, at least $3 billion. Whenever they say, whatever number they give you got to multiply it by 3. It's the nuclear industry, and you're going to be downplaying it at that. It can be located near where the energy is the size of a stadium. So now it's gone from a small modular reactor, the size of a stadium. And this is a picture that keeps showing up when you talk about Africa. That's what they're talking about. Africa can't even control their sewage. But they got a nuclear reactor site there with a couple of reactors playing a major part in a rapid move towards a carbon-free future in small modular reactors. They don't exist. They're not going to exist for decades. Yeah, they're going to eventually build one. This is 50 years later we're at right now, by the way. They still haven't built one. So let's say, because they're throwing money at all kinds of companies out there going to do it. But none of them have got a site. None of them are grading the site, prepping the site. None of them are, because listen, everything they do, they'll invite the media, and it'll be free vacations after all over the world for the media. And they want to sell this story. And so they'll be there with their shovels and their $3,000 suits on and their $1,000 dirty underwear. and they'll get their picture taken with a shovel or cutting a ribbon or something, right? It's a big boom, ha. It's a just total pageantry, but no actual. We covered it so many times. It's a shame, really. It's so easy to throttle this industry because it's so dishonest. Heightened vigilance at the Swedish nuclear plant after Nord Stream leaks. So the Nord Stream was a gas pipeline, like a natural gas pipeline from Russia. And looks like it got sabotaged. And so some of these nuclear power plants are dependent on that stream. So they can't run at full power anymore. There's only like 7% coming through, which means it's an incredible breach. The threat to Sweden has broadened and deepened as both military and civilian. Nuclear power plant, 2 plants, will go into heightened vigilance mode as a consequence of the Nord Stream gas leak. Now, the coal plants, oil plants, and gas plants couldn't care less. Nuclear plant, though, because if you have a meltdown, you lose your country. You destroyed your fresh water permanently in your country. I'm trying to control my voice because otherwise we're done. It's official U.S. because I got the flu and it's really difficult. It's official U.S. military and CIA sabotaged the Nord Stream pipelines in a joint operation. CIA and U.S. military. Is there a difference? I can't tell the difference. All available information indicates those leaks are the result of a deliberate act. Russia, this is February 7th, earlier this year, President Biden. If Russia invades, then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it. Reporter, how will you do that exactly since the project is in German control? The Biden says, I promise you, we will do it. George Galloway. He's been in the middle of it a lot, haven't he, boy? Armenia had to reduce power at a nuclear plant when Azeri's military hit Iran's electrical export lines. Like the military is literally the worst thing that happened to our planet, isn't it? They're biggest producer of misery and agony, and they have no accountability, zero accountability. Destroy country after country, use up all the resources to try to rebuild it, and you got so many dead, so many missing, so many in refugee camps, so many orphans. You destroy the pensions and the patents of the countries. It's so stupid. And they bombed the power lines and did not allow experts to approach and repair it. And due to the high volumes of power, the Armenian nuclear plant was forced to reduce power. They can't actually reduce power. They can a little bit, right? But they generally got to run at full tilt or close to it all the time. You can't just lower the RPMs on these things. They don't have RPMs, right? They're splitting atoms. Once you start, it's almost impossible to stop it. Well, you can theoretically stop it, and then you put it in water for a decade or two, where it's still splitting atoms, which is boiling the water off. Each liter got trillions of atoms into it, is released into the environment all day, every day. It's about 120,000 liters out of 1,000 in each pool, and there's over 1,000 of them worldwide hemorrhaging it into the environment all day, every day. It's a catastrophic event for humanity and the species. It's the worst case scenario. It's so evil, I can't believe they actually got away with it after all these years. There's been nobody to challenge them with an educational program. This is why we do what we do. And then the research that we do is terrifying research. Every time our experts were attempting to approach it, it came on a gunfire and had to return. And we had to reduce the power at the disease factory disguised as a nuclear plant. Large quantities of electricity, and to put the thermal power plant and other electricity stations to half capacity. Our entire energy system was intentionally disrupted, and they were not allowed us to repair it for hours. But when you have an event anywhere on the planet, it's everywhere on the planet, and it's for millions of years. And all these sites are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day into the environment at a number that would terrify you if you're actually able to wrap your minds around it. I'm talking to those, obviously, that are not familiar with this topic, not regulars, of course. But everything I'm saying is I'm talking to the new people, not the choir, obviously, right? The ones that are knowledgeable, that have been around a long time. I'm reinforcing it maybe for them, but the majority of them, the regulars, understand why we do what we do here. It's desperation to have a future. This is not a podcast. This is an educational program. This is an emergency educational program meant to rally humanity into common sense. Because the whales are not going to fix anything, okay? The polar bears are not going to fix anything. Humans have to do it. Did you know that the First World War ended because of wolves? Think about back in the early 1900s, there was huge populations of species on the planet. And they disappeared because of the nuclear industry. The nuclear testing wiped out a significant population of the species on the planet. But back in World War I, they had to stop the war because there were so many wolves killing soldiers on both sides. It was a slaughter, eh? But we all realized that what could have happened if those shells had hit the dam. And the list goes on. The human face in nuclear. Now, this is an unusual story from Nuclear Engineering International because somebody actually put their name on the story. It's extraordinary when it comes to Nuclear Engineering International, which is a lobbying group, or World Nuclear News. See how long I can get away with it? I got the wrong bucklies and it's tough on me. The human face in nuclear. Now, you regularly hear me talk about nuclear doesn't have a face. I had a pro-nuclear call me last week, and we got into a pretty good argument. Well, it wasn't an argument. I beat him up with the facts. And they were vehemently pro-nuclear. And this is one of the things I said to him, and then this article shows up, which is really interesting. Whoever wrote this article is unbelievably disingenuous, and I'll show you their name coming up in a bit. He said, so do we need nuclear power plants or not? He said, I suggest waiting for winter to answer the question. Well, you can't build a nuclear plant in 1 year, for starters. Or 10 years even, right? So this is German, where they want to extend the nuclear plants, but you got to realize how other people might interpret it, what they see there, particularly like cartoons, right? Germany's recognition nuclear has a role to play in a clean and secure energy mix is a startling. Well, no, they didn't. They didn't say anything about clean and secure energy mix. They're in the same boat everybody else is in because UN countries and NATO countries have, and other countries, but UN is 195 countries. NATO's 30. That's a significant, influential proportion of countries worldwide that are players, right, globally. Put an embargo against Russia. That was why there's an energy crisis, not because a lack of resources, but because of this shell game that is being played by the industry in the military-industrial complexes, which is really dependent upon the nuclear industry for a huge amount of their monies. I think America's was almost $1 trillion budget just came out for nuclear. So imagine Russia and China and Israel and Canada and Pakistan and India, and the list goes on, right? Now it's a huge industry. It's the biggest industry worldwide. It's the most destructive industry in human history by magnitudes of order, many, many magnitudes of order. Now is the time to take that victory and run. So, because Germany can't, because the Nord Stream is down, so Germany now doesn't have access to that fuel, see? So now is the time to take that victory and run by showing the true face of nuclear. It was a really interesting that somebody wrote that story after I had a intense argument with a pro-nuclear that wouldn't come on the show. They claimed they weren't ready to come on my show, which was a complete dishonest, disingenuous statement. By showing the true face of nuclear is just insidiously evil, monstrous, hideous, gross. For more than 20 years, they told us that our knowledge, abilities, and labors were not wanted, not needed, not part of the future. In fact, they said our occupation is morally wrong and that they wish we didn't exist and it never existed. And they're trying to say because Germany's going to keep a couple of plants on standby, that's somehow a victory. They shouldn't exist. Their children would say that if they understood it. Their friends, their families would say the same thing if they understood how insidiously evil this person and that statement was. All that came to an end when the German government admitted it needs its last remaining. They didn't admit jack. They had the entire planet writing articles all day long, screeching at Germany. Well, actually, for 11 years straight. We covered constantly. A new social contract for nuclear energy is about to be written, and the industry needs to get involved. It is no wonder that the nuclear industry quietly despised Germany's phase-out policy and its most enthusiastic cheerleaders. It doesn't give me any pleasure to write that the glossy bubble of renewables, only future, has busted. What a disgusting person who wrote this. While wind and solar are brilliant ways to use less fossil fuel as veritable sources, they can never replace it or nuclear completely. At least not with a yet non-existent ecosystem of batteries. Again, right, to suggest that batteries is the only storage on the planet. What a despicable person. What an incredible, unbelievable, revolting, despicable person that wrote that. My God, man. Evil knows no bounds, has no moral compass whatsoever. Pumped hydro can deliver 100% renewable electricity and storage. And pump water up a hill with extra energy, and it runs downhill when The sun is not shining, the wind's not blowing. But no, that don't exist. Only batteries. Why would you use batteries on such a massive storage project for? Because you can say the stuff like that dishonest creep had said and we're talking about. Now you can have 2 reservoirs, right? And you just fill up both of them. And so you're always recirculating the water, pump it up the hill with excess energy, just let it go when you need it. But compressed air storage, which is works the same way, are largely equivalent to pumped hydro power plants in terms of their applications, output, and storage capacity. Instead of pumping water from lower to upper pond during periods of excess power, ambient air is compressed and stored under pressure in an underground cavern. When electricity is required, the pressurized air is heated, and you can store the heat from the compression in salt for up to 2 weeks, and expand it in an expansion turbine driving a generator. So they have startup companies, $54 million, and all they do is dig mine shafts and compress air down there and release it. Hydro store plants 400 megawatt, 3200 megawatt compressed air energy storage, 50-year lifespan with no toxic materials, and it's as good as a large power plant. And so it can do your peak power each day for 8 hours for 50 years. And there's many other ones, right? Back to that story. But they claiming, right, non-existent ecosystems of batteries for renewables. Because they don't exist, renewables can't replace nuclear is what they're saying, right? Like in Canada, the nuclear industry, Bruce Power last year, there was $4 billion for storage for renewables. Bruce Power took all $4 billion. The year before that, they closed 700 wind farms in Ontario, which were competitors, obviously, to the nuclear industry. And then last year, they took the $4 billion for storage, and they're going to get a pumped hydro. Not a water battery where you got 2 reservoirs, but pumped hydro. For a nuclear plant, rather than let the renewable industry show proof of concept with storage. And then we got this dishonest person talking about the only system doesn't exist, which is batteries. Really, like if you look at it realistically, that's the... Now we're talking about who wrote the article. Which article? It was printed in Nuclear Engineering. If nuclear engineering can't recognize that pumped hydro and compressed air storage and other storage exist, and that the only storage that could work would be batteries, then what does that say about why would you trust nuclear engineering, academics and scientists? How can you trust people like that when you see no rebuttal to a bald-faced lie? This is the problem with the nuclear industry. In practice, fossil fuel capitalized on the shift towards renewable as backup capacity, often replacing nuclear plants that have been pushed out of the market that was designed to benefit of renewable developers. So do you get what they said there? That nuclear power plants have been pushed out of the market that were designed for the benefit of renewable. They're saying that nuclear was designed for backup for renewables. There's very few people that I want to actually physically punch in the mouth. If I see him, he's one of them. Even if Germany, and I mean that person deserves, he should be arrested, charged, and everybody in that family should have to punch him in the mouth each day for what he's doing. Even if Germany might not have a market need for the additional electricity, its neighbors would happily import the nuclear energy. Look, the plant is decrepit. There's a whole lot of issues that have to be resolved. This is why they're closing it down. It's an old plant. They don't want to have an accident and destroy their water and their farmlands, which, by the way, their plants are surrounded by farms. It's such a stupid industry. The offer was ignored by the Green-controlled energy minister, which wouldn't let go of its dream to kill the nuclear power. If that was the cold hard facts of energy security being explained by newspapers, scientists, and business leaders behind the scenes, it is sad that too many of those experts and journalists had kept their mouths shut for years. As Germany sleepwalked into this situation was created by an embargo by NATO and UN countries. They didn't sleepwalk into it. Nobody did. This was thrusted up on us by the military-industrial complex, which is UN. So enormous credit must go to the dogged green grassroots campaigners who worked to save Germany's nuclear, even when the owners of the plants had given up. The industry truly doesn't deserve them. So in other words, pro-nuclear campaigners is what he's saying, right? Saved Germany. At the human face of nuclear. It's such a strange title, because I cover this a lot, that they don't actually have anybody that comes across as human in the industry. They don't have anybody the world recognizes, he's a nuclear scientist, he's really cool, right? No, they don't have anybody. Jeremy Gordon is an independent communications consultant who wrote this article with 18 years of experience in international energy industry, and his company, Fluent Energy, support partners of all kinds to communicate matters of clean energy and sustainable developments. Jeremy Gordon. It's extraordinary that nuclear engineering actually put the name of an author on a article. It's extraordinary. We've never seen that in all these years of covering that particular media, and we cover them literally every single day. But he's so dishonest, he's so deceitful, and he's so evil in the way that he had framed his narrative. He's really like a step above evil. He's evilness. A whole different type of just evil for the sake of being evil, for the sake of making a dollar. See? He knows their lies. He knows they're very harmful industry, and so, because we hear all kinds of narratives from this industry. This is what we do. We dissect it, right? You know what my organization is, the nuclearproctologist.org. We're a think tank. We're a pro-life think tank, and we want to hold the nuclear industry accountable for crimes against humanity and crimes against the planet and the species and the ecosystem. He should be the first one. He's so evil what he wrote there, the way he wrote it. And a poll in the Welt newspaper, which is Germany, showed 82% of Germans would favor keeping nuclear. This was after inflation caused by the embargo. Right? It's split evenly between getting through the current crisis into the long term. Even among Green supporters, the total figure for support is 68%, according to the dishonest survey. The German people are not anti-nuclear, so why should the government be? Like this is the words of the pro-nuclear lobbying group, but this person is exceptionally evil. It's also far above and beyond the navel-gazing of waste disposal debates. The problem with waste is splitting the atoms into your community. And the problem with that is you're surrounded by farms. All these plants are surrounded by farms. Farms are shipped to markets, and people are permanently poisoned, and they get sick and die from up to 1,800 illnesses from the radiation. I think it's really telling how evil he actually is. That's emblematic of the nuclear industry. What we call the hateful nuclear industry, because that's the only way you can describe them, is hateful. Let me show you what I mean, though, because when I talk about subjects, if I don't show it, I'm worried that people won't understand how incredibly brutal, bizarre this industry actually is. What makes it so, I'm going to show it to you, that's the best way to do it. This is not a difficult subject to understand, if you're honest. Give me a second. So 50 becquerels a kilogram is irreversible lesions. Irreversible heart damage for children. For adults, 50 becquerels a kilogram is irreversible lesions on their organs. So why are nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? And we're not talking about some, we're talking about the majority of them. Why are the majority of nuclear power plants surrounded by farms when they're all hemorrhaging radiation, specifically from their fuel pools and their waste? And the reason I'm saying that is because they have lots of studies showing how grapes sucks up radiations and strawberries sucks up radiation and plants suck up radiation. Tomato plants suck up radiation. And that poisons you. Your potatoes are poisoned. Your trees and fruits are poisoned. Your wheat is poisoned. Your soil is poisoned. Your meadows are poisoned because these places are hemorrhaging radiation into your environment. And they know that because they got all these studies, and there's hundreds of thousands at Elsevier, hundreds of thousands at Springer, hundreds of thousands of academic studies at Wiley, all showing the same thing, that this stuff is evil. And that, why do they build it in prime farmland? When the harmful effects of radiation are so well known. Even though they'll deny that it's well known. Because that's how they survive. That's how they make they're very, very clever. They spend a lot of effort. How do they tell a lie and paint it up as a rose? This is what the industry is. That's what they do for a living, right? That's what a journalist does for a living. They're no longer neutral. They're lobbying groups. They call themselves public relations, but they're just lobbying groups. Many across the nuclear industry have been critical of the green pursuit of nuclear shutdown. Well, the people that work in the industry don't want to see it shut down, right? That's what he's talking about. There's not many. It's the pro-industry that's making money from it. The historical turning point for the nuclear sector can and should be given some more momentum, but let us first take a moment of reflection. It's easy to see them as irresponsible, arrogant, or even stupid. But let us remember they are not stupid, they are very principled, and we need to show Germany and other countries it influences what nuclear is really all about, what its people are really like, and what really motivates them. They're just evil. I haven't found a single redeeming quality in the pro-nuclear community. They're perpetual lawyers. And what Jeremy Gordon, an independent communication consultant, a lobbyist, pro-nuclear lobbyist, with 18 years of mass murder, and his company is Fluent in Energy. He's just a common murderer. He has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. He wrote this incredible article specifically to deceive and manipulate people. There wasn't a shred of honesty in the entire article. And it's printed in Nuclear Engineering, in an engineering magazine that claims there's no solution for storage, only batteries. When obviously this is a madness to suggest there's no alternative or no better. His company. What really motivates them is his company. Must be a new conversation about Germany's relationship with nuclear energy. It is great that there are many in the political sphere who want to collaborate on this, but do not wait for this to be stated by the authorities and institutes set up and funded by decades of green policies. There's an official recognition that the nuclear energy is low carbon, which is, you can't, all nuclear power plants have two external power plants to run it. Like every nuclear plant got a coal, gas, or oil plant dedicated to it. The great big plants, two of them, dedicated. Carbon is good for the planet, by the way. The emissions caused by radioactive fallout is your number one enemy. Yeah, the crazy batshit lunatic world of nuclear. Let me see. There we go. I'm looking for that. So, radioactive fallout is pulsing energy. This is a plume model from Fukushima based on 20 days. There's a lot of these models, right? This is 19 days, covering the planet in radioactive fallout. This is France's model of 16 days. And so gas, oil, and coal emissions don't make plumes like that. Those emissions don't go very far. They're very heavy, right? But nuclear emissions, this is France's model based on 16 days, covering the planet in just 16 days. Covering the entire planet in radioactive fallout. It didn't stop after 16 days, for goodness sakes. It probably won't stop for another couple of thousand years. So it's an invisible plume that's been going on for 80 years, not just Fukushima. It covers the planet, the upper troposphere, all the way to the ocean floor, suspended from the ocean floor to the surface, pulsing energy every second for millions and millions of years. Gas, oil, and coal don't have those attributes. Only nuclear does. Right? The reason we have terrorist laws, the reason we have all kinds of security, billion-dollar securities at nuclear plants, is because you can destroy your country with an event at a nuclear plant. And you do anyway, because your fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day. There's over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide doing this to our planet all day. This is why they don't want it underground. It's purposely to exterminate the species and humans. It is sustainable. It has an important role to play, and this is the conclusion of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is United Nations. UNSCLEAR will say the same thing, which is United Nations. IAEA says the same thing, which is United Nations. ERPA says the same thing, which is United Nations. The ICRP says the same thing, which is the same people in United Nations. They have the same hat and they wear many buttons. like 100 of them. It's a good old boys club, and their job is to cut everybody's throat. What was it? Let me see if I can get the video for you. It's a small group of people. Kathleen Higley. So she sums it up. She sums it up pretty quick. You got Miles O'Brien in the center. You got a whole bunch of scumbags there. I'm not going to get into it tonight, but let's play that clip. She breaks it down much better than I can.
When I was trying to pull this talk together.
My apologies. Let me fix that. I can't believe it on that. I know the volume is down. I just recorded it too high.
When I was trying to pull this talk together, not only will I sort of get a little philosophical about the impacts and the like and try to put things in context, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about who are these radiation experts that get trotted out in events like this, or that get to participate in various activities and analysis to make pronouncements about is something safe or not safe. And if you look, you'll see organizations that are often represented. The ICRP, International Commission on Radiological Protection, a premier organization. You'll see UNSCEAR and IRPA. So UNSCEAR is the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. IRPA, the International Radiation Protection Association. The IAEA and some of its folks, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Our own US NCRP. And then there are a number of other organizations. So there's PAHO, there's a Health Physics Society, there's World Health Organization. All of these will bring in, as necessary, experts to speak to you on issues related to radiation protection, radiation safety, and impacts. But if you go a little deeper and you start looking at these organizations, the ICRP, for example, very well known. It's been operating nearly 100 years, not quite. Main commission, 10 people. It's got 5 standing committees. So it's 100-ish folks. I lead one of the 5 committees. If you look at the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation that looked at the effects from Chernobyl, from Fukushima, from other areas, and that has about 30, roughly, countries that are represented in that group. If you start teasing through these pictures, you're going to see the same people on every one of those organizations. So the same people from ICRP are on UNSCEAR, they're in IRPA. If you look at the NCRP, again, the US organization that advises the country on radiation protection issues, it's 100 people, a lot of gray-haired 100 people. And most of them are part of UNSCEAR, are part of IRPA, are part of ICRP, participate in IAEA. So the result, or the real world, is that there's not that many folks that really do radiation safety, radionuclide transport, dose calculations, all of this in the world. It's a pretty small club. And we wear 20 hats. Today I put on 3 pins, and I could put on a whole bunch more, but Health Physics Society, ICRP, Certified Health Physicist, I've got NCRP on there, I've done IAEA, and so the point is, we're a small group, you should cherish us. So
that's the National Press Club in Washington, folks. That's supposed to be the journalist. And if you watch that whole, thing, we've covered the whole thing years ago. It's just lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. It's really stunning, right? So I chopped out that clip because it shows you how dishonest they are. It's just the same group going everywhere where policies are going to be set and telling the same lies. All of them should be arrested. All of them should be arrested. And we should bring back the death penalty for countries that don't have it and just apply it only to the nuclear industry. And it shouldn't be like lethal injections or hanging or whatever. It should be burn them at the stake alive as a deterrent to protect our planet. So, quoting United Nations, the experience of renewables helps us use less fossil fuel, cannot eliminate them completely with current technology, but it could, obviously, 100%. And it will. I showed you that at the very beginning, right? That last year was 333 nuclear power plants, 291 gigawatts of renewables came online, but only 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear. There's not non-existent ecosystem of batteries, and not as yet non-existent So claiming batteries is the only solution to power a million people at a time, you'll never get there. Why would you? Right, and that was the point. They're just scum. They're actual scumbags. They got the job because they're scumbags. On top of that, like Kathleen Higley. The need is critical for security and for the environment. Nuclear is the worst thing that can happen to the environment. And evict fossil fuel from the central position. Fossil fuel is fine. Carbon is fine. If you had no carbon, the planet would be just a wasteland. There'd be nothing alive on the planet whatsoever. Nothing can exist without carbon. The idea of demonizing carbon was to promote the nuclear industry. Desperations, that didn't work. Now they got this fabled small modular reactors that don't exist. And so getting countries to sign memorandum of understandings rather than, which ties up the money in a technology that doesn't exist. And even when it does exist, it takes a decade to get the kinks out of it. Then you have to redesign it before you can start manufacturing it and mass producing it. In other words, 35 years down the road. And renewables, by 2026, between 2020 and 2026, as I showed you at the beginning, will be 4,800 gigawatts. It'll be a lot more than that by 2026, by the way, which is equal to all fossil gas, oil, and coal and nuclear combined on the planet in just 6 years. So what do you think is going to happen for the next 6 years? You really think that's going to go backwards? Despite the fact that they drove up the price of harmless commodities through the roof to try to scuttle the renewable renaissance. Look, renewables is the right thing to do. There is no sensible argument against it. That's why they make up all the stuff they do, right? There's no legitimate argument against it. And so using batteries is because that way it can't handle peak power. From an engineer, this is nuclear engineering story, right? That we're still reading here. It was clear after the Constipated Party 26 conference, we covered it last year, right? Started on Halloween, which is appropriate, by the way, and ended on the 13th of November, which is appropriate. And we done a show every single day of all the headlines that we can aggregate that was coming out each day. Let us meet those arguments on equal terms by representing ourselves to the human stories and experiences of the nuclear workers, the nuclear scientists, nuclear experts, and the nuclear communities of nuclear energy. These are all perpetual lawyers, perpetual demons, by the way. If the answer to hate is humanity, then let's show the true face of nuclear in Germany, the true face of a competent, skilled, and principled sector that works hard for common values and a strong economy in a secure country with a clean environment, which is none of the attributes that nuclear has. This is the dawn of a new social contract for disease factories known as nuclear in Germany and throughout all the countries it has influenced against nuclear. But the industry can't complacently expect this to develop on its own. It has to invest today in showing its true face once again. Its true face is disgusting. It's despicable. It's murderous. It's hateful. It's dishonest, like Jeremy Gordon. It's 100% dishonest, every facet of it. It has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. So he's trying to say to everybody, stop showing your true monstrous faces all the time. You're scaring the sheeple. French regulatory agencies urge nuclear tarts to return to the jobs to prevent power stretch. Half the fleet is down and now they're on strike. EDF strike rules out nuclear as France turns to UK for help. Which is awesome, isn't it? France turns to the UK for help. Britain could soon come to France's rescue. So is Germany. Germany's exporting power to France, for goodness sakes. As the country's nuclear energy output plummets. It didn't plummet, it just died. It's, again, it's such a dishonest industry. Let me see what I got done here. I'm going to play video from the weekend for you. And I'm so congested up. I'm not going to push my... because I want to do a show tomorrow night and next night, right? I'm not going to push myself any harder than here because my forehead is just shockingly... I'm much better than yesterday, but I'm not all the way there yet. And so tomorrow I got to go back and check the engine tomorrow morning to make sure it's the fuel pump. The fuel pump is in behind the manifold on top of that, right? And there's no way we can afford to get a shop to do it. We did raise $200 from James Lucid and $130 from Obsolete Optics, which means we can go ahead and fix the fuel pump. I'm going to take the hose off the Raycor water separator tomorrow and try to pump fuel through, right? Just to make sure it's not happening at the filter. Just to make sure I rule that out before I spend money. And because once I commit to that, I got to go to St. John's to pick it up. Hopefully they got it in stock. I found it online, but I won't be able to get it till maybe the 11th. But we noticed that it never comes in on time. This is a spider that got a bumblebee in its web on my motor. This was Wednesday or Thursday, I think, last week. And the reason I took the picture was because it was like that for hours and hours and hours. And I thought the spider was dead. But the spider wasn't dead. About 5 hours later, he finished the job. But if you look at his web, the web is deformed, right? It's not an actual web. Right? There's no physics. The web is just a couple of loose strands. See that? And he got the bee. Now maybe the bee stung him, and it took him a while for him to recover, because it was like this for about 10 hours. They never moved. I had noticed it and forgot about it, and then when I noticed the next time, I went and grabbed the camera and took the picture. But that night, just before dark, I went and checked, and he had moved up underneath the blade there. But look how deformed the web is. There's no physical web. It's completely deformed. So you're not getting spider webs on trees and plants, but you're getting it on physical things like your home or your vehicle or your shovel and stuff like that. But I haven't seen any webs out in the forest. Now, I haven't spent a lot of time this summer, but I did spring, and I probably will this fall maybe. And so this is a I cleaned the lens but left a smudge on the lens, so you have to ignore that, unfortunately. We'll just play this couple of minutes of video that is self-explanatory. I was trying to figure out what was going on with the engine, and then all of a sudden I realized this, so I took the camera and to tell the story. It's the first day of October, 2022. We got the filter is empty, which is what I figured was going on. So hopefully it's a blockage, not a filter, or not a pump. Yeah, it's the pump, though. I'm assuming that's the pump right there. Because it didn't make any noise, right? Let's check that again. I got the flashlight there. Yeah, that's empty. Because that's after? Sorry, that's empty. The filter's after the pump, right? I should tap that and focus it, because the focus is better when I tuck that in my chest, I wonder. And check for power to the pump first, right? I'm assuming that's a ground. Which is my left hand. And I got power. So I did have power there for sure. Which means it's the pump, right? I can't see anything. I'm going to have to let go of the camera for a minute. It only takes a couple hours to strip it down. I got power to that. I just don't like doing it anymore. I've done lots of this, so I'll get it done, right? To the fuel pump. Well, that's a bit better. I got power to the fuel pump, but the filter is empty, which means the fuel pump is not working. So before I changed the idler control valve, my alarm would go off because it wasn't functional, right? So that stopped it. I don't know if the lights are still blinking. I never looked when I came in. Because with the idler control valve, you had the siren and the lights going. Now they're not. Keys on. I got no warning lights. So that worked, right? The idler control valve. That's pretty cool. Worked. So I got a rate core filter down below. Got a rate core filter down below. Saturday night. This is Saturday I done this. The rate core filter is pretty disgusting looking. Let me try the balloon down there. Come on. Which one? Because I got three, right? This tank. Here's the flashlight when you need it. So yeah, that's right. You should change the fuel pump every so often. I did, right? We went to Alaska 6 times with this boat. Oh, that's the tank right here. It's got a lot of wear and tear, right? So that's the ball down there. Can't do it without letting go with one hand. That ball is hard. It's not supposed to be hard. It should lose pressure. My cap is loose. My vent cap was loose, which is supposed to be. Yeah. So I don't know how bad the filter is underneath it. It looks good underneath. The rate core filter looked okay. I'll check it tomorrow. I'll try one of the other tanks, because I got 3 tanks down there, right? I'll do that tomorrow, because I just hurt my stomach that time. But, it's got water in the bilge down there, yeah. I had power. We had power to the pump, which I'm assuming is the pump. I gotta go look it up now, make sure.
because I couldn't see the hoses. Because I was hanging on to the gimbal.
I had the gimbal in one hand, flashlight in the other, because it's 6 o'clock. It's a dark day.
Right now, that makes me happy that we got.
So it's the pump.
There should be fuel in the filter, right?
I'll double check.
Because it fires up each time I turn the key, and it's.
So there is water down in the bilge. You can't. The pump won't suck all the water out unless the boat is moving. And so fresh water gets into the bilge from above, and we had heavy rains for a couple of days. So you'll get a couple of gallons down there. Colette noticed it, and let me play the rest of that for you.
Stops again immediately. Now we drove it around with the other oiler control valve on it, but it would only run at 30%. And the alarms are now gone off.
So that meant it worked.
Which meant it recognized that we changed the oiler control valve. Because normally it beeps constantly and flashes lights at you. And so it's hard to believe another problem cropped up while I was fixing that problem. Because, like, I tried it there last week with a cheap oiler control valve that I whittled away to make it fit, and it would fire up with that one, but it wouldn't idle very good. But it would always like run a little bit.
And then when I put the old one back in, and then she would run, right? Because the old one, we had put it in oil and got it loose enough so it ran at 30% of throttle, right? But it wouldn't cut out on you. But that's how we identified it. So when I replaced it, all the alarms went off and all the lights went off, which meant that it recognized it. But at the same time, my pump gave out. So when you turn on the key, you'll hear the pump prime, right? And it'll prime that filter I showed you originally on the back of it. It didn't do that. And I'll double check tomorrow, then I'll call the supplier and see if they got one in stock. And I'll head into the city tomorrow if they got it and pick it up. If not, then... Because they'll order it from other places in the province if it's here and ship it right away. That's the quickest way to do it. If it's not on... They're not going to be on back order because they sell universal ones on Amazon for that motor. And it also works for Yamaha and a Mercury. Right, and I looked at it. It's the right pump. The fitting for the thing on it is different, but it doesn't matter because there's lots of room there. So they're universals, right? It's just a pump, and it's controlled by. So, I don't know. We'll look at it tomorrow morning. We'll call that a show. That was a pretty good show. Unfortunately, I had so much news to cover. It's an absurd amount of news to cover. And yeah, you should change those pumps. Now it's in behind the manifold. I got to take that manifold off. And the pump is mounted, believe it or not, how bizarre is that? But the pump is actually mounted on the back side of the manifold. So when you take the manifold off, it's actually connected to the back of the manifold and to the power head, right? There's like 15, 16 bolts got to come off and a bunch of sensors and blah, blah, blah. I can do the job. Then you got to take the pump apart, pull out the old one, reinstall it, fill it up. Blah, blah. By rights, you should take it apart and clean, because there's a sediment bowl right where the pump is to. So stuff will gather up in there. There's a filter on the bottom of the pump too, so the sediment bowl. Anyway, that's boring stuff, I'm sure. Well, we got a show in. I'm happy with that. I'm so sick the last couple of days. I can't believe the flu. I never get the flu. It's brutal. You sleep for a couple hours and you wake up and you got to run and vomit. Sure, nobody wanted to hear that. Because of all the phlegm, right? And you can't breathe because you're hacking. It's a terrible feeling. And so when I was playing the video of Kathleen Higley at the press club in Washington there earlier, I ran into the washroom and cleaned out my sinuses, but it didn't work 100%. So that's a good show. We'll get up and get after it tomorrow morning. Now, the problem was, because we didn't get our pressure washer, right? And so there's a sale on in the city for pressure washers. For gas-driven pressure washer, 3,200 PSI is $299. But these are refurbished that people sent back, and they were refurbished. And they had 8 on Friday, and I called them today. They had 3 left. Because that's the pressure washer you would rather. I was tempted to go get it today, and because we raised enough money to almost do it, right? But the problem is we got to get that pump fixed. We got to get out on the ocean, and we need the pressure washer, but we blew that money trying to fix the truck. After all these years, everything's catching up on me, and we're keeping up with it, thank goodness. And so I'm pretty grateful that we're still going. And we identified the problem. I'll deal with that tomorrow. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far. I'm going to do a shout out for everybody, because it's been a few days since we've done that. Dana Nasana, Danny-san. Like you said, I couldn't do a show on Friday because I was too congested. Colette S. Hi, Colette. Thinker. Opus. My counter is in minutes. Counts per minute. Of Gamma. Port Angeles. Monday. Daryl. Thank you, everybody. James Lucet, again, thanks, James, my man. Awesome. I mean, like, we went through all of our resources, and all I can think about is getting back on the ocean. I don't care what it takes. We got to get back out there on the ocean. We got to pull that off somehow, and it doesn't seem like this is a big deal to finish, get the pump. Because the pump is not the whole mechanism, it's inside the mechanism. And so if they're going to rob me at the dealership, I'll order it in from Amazon, because I found quite a few on Amazon, but they take a long time to get here. And time is not on our side, right? 4th, Savannah's 4th. Chelsea MC. Hi, everybody. Peaceware. John Shiflett. Provoke. Good night, everybody. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Edward, Leslie, Kimberly, Kevin Blanche. Hi, Kevin. Starlight. I just got reading glasses here, but I can't focus. Starlight. Let's finish this out. I gotta get back to the bathroom and get rid of my guts, throw them up out there. I'm a bit better than yesterday, so that's a good sign. A Dale P. John Curtis. My apologies if I missed anybody. I'm going pretty quick here. Angel's Place. Anyway, Stephen Young. Hi, Stephen. Don Vincent Walter. See, we got spammed earlier by a chat bot. Thanks, Dana. And so my video should be in 1080 tonight, right? Timber Traveler. Thursday's video was 720. The first one we tried was 240. But if you watch a video in 240, the next video you watch will be in 240 if you don't fix it. I meant to tell everybody that at the beginning to make sure they set the resolution of the video. Because 240 is not watchable, right? Cleveland Marco. Richard McCann. Cutie Susie. Brian S. There was another Chelsea there also. I don't see right now. Okay, let's do the poll. Bring up the poll. Does it make more sense to replace TEPCO with the companies that built Fukushima nuclear power plant? And why would somebody say no? Well, because they're not. Nobody wants in the industry wants that question out there that I got there. But thank goodness that was spammers that spammed us. But the rest of everybody else took the moral high ground. Okay, looks like I got everybody. I'm just going to double check before we call it a night. I'll read the comments hopefully after. I don't pass out first. Looks fantastic. That makes me feel good. We got in because we had the whole system. We had to redo the whole system multiple times last week, and it took 36 hours basically to get back up and running. 36 hours of software. I'm still trying not to pull all of the rest of my hair out of my head. It was horrible. It was a horrible experience. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. I'll be here. I got Buckley's. I'll be back. Ew, Buckley's, man. That stuff is terrible. Why the hell would you make a cough syrup that tastes like Vicks Vapor Rub? What kind of sadistic person thought that up? I can't even laugh because it starts to lose my throat. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Take care, folks. Yeah, good night, folks. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you can. Take care now.